Hi, and welcome to Stephan Livera podcast, a show about Bitcoin. Have you thought about inheritance? What are you going to do when you want to pass your Bitcoin on to your heirs or your family and your loved ones? Hector Rosekrans of Casa joins me to talk about this, and we talk about a number of things around securing our Bitcoin, self-custody and custodial solutions, how early it is in Bitcoin inheritance, Casa covenant, hardware wallets, and multi-sig and inheritance setups. Will they standardize? This show brought to you by Swan Bitcoin. Swan Bitcoin holds a deep conviction that Bitcoin is the future of money. Swan's aim is to help you maximize your position in this dominant digital monetary network. As a Swan private client, you will have unlimited access to their team, strategic resources, and commitment to Bitcoin education. This is an asymmetric investment of unparalleled proportions, rapidly becoming the preeminent wealth preservation asset for every individual and institution in the world. An opportunity like this to build and preserve legacy-impacting wealth for your family or company will not likely be seen again in our lifetimes. The Swan private team stands ready to earn the right to walk alongside you on every step of this journey into the future of money. Learn more at swanbitcoin.com/private or email the CEO, Corey, directly, corey@swanbitcoin.com. Lend at Hodl Hodl is a peer-to-peer Bitcoin-backed lending platform where you can lend or borrow Bitcoin and stablecoins globally and anonymously. Lend at Hodl Hodl is a way to earn extra income on your stablecoins by lending with an average of 25% APR. On the other hand, if you have Bitcoin and you need some fiat, you no longer need to sell. You can actually collateralize some of your Bitcoin and borrow against that, and you will still hold one key in the 2 of 3 multi-signature controlling your Bitcoin during the loan period. Hodl Hodl does not hold your funds. So this is a peer-to-peer lending and borrowing platform. You set your own terms and put up offers depending on how long you want to borrow or lend and the interest rate. Check it out at lend.hodlhodl.com. Are you interested in Bitcoin mining? Compass is an online marketplace making it easier for everyone to do that. With Bitcoin, you want to be regularly accumulating, and mining is one way to do that. With Compass, you can select an ASIC machine and purchase that, and that will be sent at one of the facilities that they have vetted around the world. And so you can get involved in the mining game without necessarily having to put in millions and millions of dollars. So you can tap into the economies of scale that Compass are helping provide for you and access reasonably priced hardware and cheap industrial power rates. Remember, for many of us, we can't really profitably mine on our home residential power rates. So with Compass, you can access better power rates. So Compass offer hardware and hosting bundles, so you don't need advanced technical knowledge. You can quickly get started. Go to compassmining.io to start mining Bitcoin today. Hector, welcome to the show.
Hey, Stephan, how are you doing today?
Doing well. I know you've been talking a lot about, securing your keys and doing some of this stuff. And I know you are keen to talk about inheritance. And I know this is a big thing for a lot of us as Bitcoiners. We think we're going to live forever, don't we?
Absolutely, yeah. That's the plan at least, but it's good to prepare for the contingency just in case.
Yeah. So look, just for listeners who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So my name is Hector Rosekrans. I'm the director of client services at Casa. I've been in this role for 2 years now. A little bit of time in the industry before that. I actually got started here at in the blockchain things at JP Morgan. So I like to point out I went from blockchainer to shitcoiner to Bitcoiner. I'm really happy with where I've landed on that spectrum. But yeah, and then I also have a background in the in the military. I was in the U.S. Navy for a while, and that's really kind of what kind of brought me to Casa is it's putting together the security side of things, the technology side of things, the economic side of things, like bringing all that together was what really kind of brought me to Bitcoin. And yeah, helping people kind of solve the problem of self-custody. It's this technical challenge, but at the same time, it's it's something that's really important to get right and to make it user friendly. And so, yeah, that's basically what I get to do all day is help people be better, more secure Bitcoiners.
Yeah, that's great. And so I'm trying to keep the show accessible for new people, right? For new coiners out there. And a common thing I hear from people, even when I'm out at meetups and I'm talking to new coiners out there, they're a bit scared about taking their coins off the exchange, right? They're like, I've got some coin. And I'll ask them, hey, have you learned to self-custody? And they're like, oh, no, I've still got that on the exchange, or I've still got it with the broker, or, and so it's about trying to make it easy for them to sort of come off the exchange, at least starting small, right? And then slowly, as you get more comfortable, you do these things for yourself. But it obviously takes a bit of work and practice. and it's not just something that comes for free, right? You have to put in the time.
Yeah, absolutely. You really you do. And this is one of those places where I think that like that just I lean on some of my military background is you learn to operate weapon systems. These are things that are incredibly important. It's important to understand them. It's important to know how to use them right. But ultimately, they are tools. They're tools that are incredibly powerful that can grant you a lot of kind of capability and the ability to be to exist in the world in a certain way. But if you don't understand how to use them, you can certainly hurt yourself. And I'll also be the first person to admit I got a ledger when I was getting into Bitcoin back in the day. I got a ledger and that thing sat on my desk for months because I was terrified that I was going to do the wrong thing. It's like I wrote down the seed phrase, but I was like, did it get on my camera? Was it possible someone was scanning it? Do I have to reset it now? How do I reset it? Wait, did I do like a small test transfer? Did I get those funds off? It can be really intimidating. And that's really what one of my biggest goals is as a Bitcoiner is to make it more approachable and make it easier to do that and try to solve some of those problems from like a technical perspective, but also from like a user experience perspective to just make it easier to do that, make it feel a lot more comfortable to take that step and take that leap into self-custody.
Yeah, of course. And so that's definitely for new listeners, that's definitely the ethos we encourage is that you take the time, you learn, and there are some basic tools and basic competence that you'll just have to do. And I think going with your analogy there of it's a tool and you need to learn to use it. And it's like you need to drill it, right? You need to be ready to use it. So that way, when the time comes, you know exactly how to do it. You've done this process, So what would be some of the, I guess, first level things people need to learn and know before they can, become comfortable with doing self custody and then going down that track as well of thinking about inheritance?
Yeah, it's really important, I think, to like have the right mental model on what a key is and how it works. And so, because once you kind of get that, everything else starts to fit into place. But the thing that kind of drives me crazy sometimes is the terminology we use. We say, "Oh yeah, it's my Trezor wallet, my cold card wallet that I'm keeping my funds on. My Bitcoin is on my cold card. My Bitcoin is on my Trezor." And that's great for a single sig. It's a pretty good mental model for a single sig because, well, your Bitcoin's not really there. Your Bitcoin's really on the ledger on everyone's node in the network. Your key is on that device. As long as you know your key's there, you need to be really careful with your key. You're in pretty good shape. But what a lot of people don't understand is then when you go to multi-sig, that now if you think that, well, is my Bitcoin split up amongst all my different devices that are part of my multi-sig? How does this work? If I lose one, how much of my Bitcoin do I lose? The mental model kind of starts to break down. It's like, no, the device is just holding your key. Your Bitcoin's in the cloud. And, these devices are designed to just hold that key in one place. And the other thing here is that, keys are just pieces of data and they can be manipulated the same way any other device in the world can be manipulated. I love hardware devices. I love hardware wallets because they exist to do one thing. They exist to keep that key on that device and never leak it out to the outside world. But when you get into multi-sig, you can start to use other approaches and other ways to to keep those keys that have other trade-offs, other benefits, and also other costs to them. Like with for instance with Casa, with a number of multi-sig setups, you'll use one or two hotkeys as part of like your overall quorum. And that's a really bad idea if you have a lot of Bitcoin on your set, on like your one key setup, because a hotkey can be stolen. When you get to multi-sig, what you lose in that security, any hotkey even stored in a good, secure, encrypted storage could potentially be leaked. But if it's only one key out of your key set, what you gain from that is you gain that resiliency, you gain that redundancy. And so it's one of the reasons why I really think that more people should make the jump directly to multi-sig and not say like, oh, I want to go single sig kind of in the middle. Single sig is a great way to go. It is a good way to get started. But if you go to multi-sig, there's actually a lot more flexibility that you have, which ultimately means more security. It does take a little bit more work on the front end to kind of think about it and understand it and set it up. But if you're willing to put in the work, you get yourself to a much better and much more knowledgeable position right off the bat.
Yeah, interesting point there. So I think for a long time in this industry, the common advice has been, start on, say, a phone wallet, small amount, and then maybe progress to a hardware wallet, and then maybe get a hardware wallet with a passphrase, and then go to multi-signature. But I guess what you're saying now is actually maybe we're starting to reach a point in this industry where people should just be going direct to multi-signature. Is that basically the argument you're making for people who are buying, a certain amount, like I guess above a certain amount, you should just go straight to multi-sig?
I think that's pretty close. I mean, I wouldn't say skip the phone wallet part because phone wallets are great. They're hot wallets. They're fast. They're easy. You can kind of try a lot of different ones. You can play around with it. Phone wallets are a great tool for kind of learning about how it works and getting comfortable with starting to play around with actual real Bitcoin on chain transactions. I think that's always the best place to start with very small amounts. But then once you get to the level that like, okay, I do want to hold this for a long period of time, that's where I think that like understanding how these different pieces kind of fit into the overall security model can be a really can be a huge benefit, and ultimately something that not only is safer, but also just helps you understand better what's really going on and what you're really doing.
Right, yeah. And I think that is an interesting point as well around the flexibility aspect, right? Because it's allowing you to be able to arguably travel in a way without risking all your coins in one go. Because if you have the keys split up and you're traveling, then it kind of helps you in that aspect. But I guess probably one thing just before we get into that. So I guess just to talk through the idea around inheritance, right? As calling back to what we were saying before, it's like we think we're just going to live forever, right? And so at the end of the day, then for a lot of people who are just sitting on, say, a single signature hardware wallet, they're trusting and relying on the idea that their family or their parents or their daughter or their son will find that 24-word seed and ideally either know the passphrase or they have it written down somewhere and they know how to access it. And that's basically what most people, if I had to guess, that's probably what a lot of people are relying on, unless they've gone for, say, for you guys with Casa or with one of my sponsors, Unchained Capital, or with an actual custodian. So I guess what's your initial kind of take there on how we should be thinking about inheritance and how should we be looking to improve that?
Yeah, and it's a great question. It's really kind of an underexplored area. There's basically a lot of our family members are maybe not hardcore Bitcoiners. I mean, if my wife was as deep into this stuff as I am, she would know exactly what the setup looks like. She'd know exactly where to go and find the stuff. She would be, she'd be like, okay, Hector, where are the sovereign recovery instructions? Do you think I should be using Electrum or Spectre when I'm running this up? Which node that you're running should I be plugging into? Like, well, don't run that one. But most of our loved ones are not quite as deep down the rabbit hole as we are. And so there's this point in which it's like, if our family finds themselves in a situation where we're not there to help them, they really can kind of be in a lot of trouble. It's like, you may have been living a life where you're expecting to have a certain amount of wealth, a certain amount of assets, but if you can't find that 24-word seed phrase, if you can't find that hardware device, if you have 3 shots on that ledger pin and you can't find where the pin's written down, you can be in a situation where all that wealth is potentially at risk, and it's already a stressful time in anybody's life when you lose a loved one. And so it's really important to get this right, put a plan in place. And you also want to think about it from the other side. There's potential, if you make it too easy for anyone in your family to get access to the funds, you're potentially unintentionally introducing backdoors and introducing risk into your setup. And this is like where the cool, technical, exciting flexibility of multisig actually turns into a really important use case. One of many, but all kind of fit into this category of like, how do you make Bitcoin management easier and more comfortable in a lot of different scenarios, in a lot of different cases? And inheritance is really just kind of one of the most obvious and most important ones, I think, to get right here.
Yeah, that's a hard one because, as you were saying, you want to make it depends on your situation. Obviously, everyone's situation is different, but you might be in a scenario where you don't want to give access now while you're still alive and you want it to only trigger when you die. And so maybe you need to use a lawyer or you need to, but some of us might also be in a scenario where, okay, you do trust fully your loved ones, and but you just need to make sure they have somebody they can call when something happens, right? And do you assigned a person? So I guess for listeners out there, you've got to think about, well, if something happened to you, do your loved ones know who to call, because here's the thing: if they are not savvy and they just post online, oh hey, can someone help me? And then guess what? All the scammers are going to come for them and say, oh yeah, I can help you out. Just tell me your 12 words, right?
Yeah. And I've seen this myself. Like, I've seen people posting things like this online on different, on Twitter, on different forums, and I'll DM someone. I'll say like, look, I really know what I'm talking about. I get paid to do this, but I'm sure their DMs are full of people saying exactly that. Like, no, but really, but me, like I work for this company, and like we do this for a living. But there's no good way to know who to trust without kind of having the cultural knowledge that we've all developed across this industry. And that's another real risk, is that you find the wrong person and they could really steer you in the wrong direction here. And that's why you have to think about this stuff ahead of time. You have to put a plan in place and make sure that they know what to do. Keep that as simple as possible, in terms of managing your relationships with your loved ones. Again, my wife is, she's on a password manager now. Begrudgingly, it was not her favorite. It was not her favorite project. Our marriage survived, I'm happy to say. But these are the kinds of issues that, like, these day-to-day issues that long-term Bitcoin management is going to require us to address.
Yeah, and it's a very good point there around long-term management, right? Because, as we speak today, Bitcoin price is whatever, $30,000 US per Bitcoin. But if we're right about this thing and it's literally millions of dollars, like $10 million per coin in 10 years' time or whatever, that's a lot of money. And when you're gone, you want to make sure that your family can still access that stuff. So yeah, difficult conversation and difficult thing to think about and talk about, but it's a necessary conversation for many of us. So let's talk a little bit about the aspects there of using a lawyer and then using maybe a technical expert. Like, how should we think about that aspect of it? Like, we might have to have a lawyer hold, some way of accessing one of our keys, but then you might have somebody else who's like a technical expert for your family to go to. How do you think about that?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And I spent a lot of time talking to a lot of lawyers about this whole approach. Casa's kind of original conception of how we were going to do this was going to involve a lawyer in that process, essentially as a key holder. We had this idea, there's going to be a bunch of lawyers out there, they're going to want to hold keys, it's going to be good business for them. And it'll be kind of just a normal part of the estate planning process. They have a whole slew of regulatory requirements. They do not want that liability. And, I have found a few lawyers who are willing to do that, but they tend to be lawyers who are working for one client, because that client is providing them so much business that they're like a family attorney at that point. And so, if you have a lawyer who's interested in holding a key, that's great. Lawyers are great when it comes to estate planning and making sure all the legal stuff is exactly the way that you want it. But what they're not going to be able to do is they're not going to be able to give you the guidance to make sure that the actual custody, the actual control of those assets matches what you want to have happen. For that, you're going to have to either do it yourself with your key management, or you're going to have to work with an expert, work with a consultant, work with a trusted friend who kind of help you put the technical and the actual control side of it into place. And that's can be a pain, but the cool thing about that is if you get it right, and you do this right and you put in the work, it's actually a much better solution than even what you have with the stock, with a brokerage that's you're gonna have to go through a third party to transfer those assets over. You do it the right way with a self custody setup, and these assets are actually theirs. They are directly in control of your family. They can never be taken. No one else outside of that can ever take control of them. So it's a much better endpoint that you can get to by thinking through some of the stuff ahead of time.
Yeah, and so it strikes me as using services like what Casa have, it's occupying something of a middle position, because it's like a hybrid, right? You're trying to get the best of both worlds in that sense of giving you and maybe your family or your heirs some ability to control and spend those Bitcoins without relying on, so much on someone else, right? You're not relying on a custodian to be able to do that. You can, if everything goes right, you've kind of got it all within your family. And if something goes wrong, I guess in the Casa case, Casa holds one of the keys, right? So that's also where Casa can help out there. And I think that's actually a good direction that the industry should go, because as we mentioned before, it's self-custody is so important to maintaining the decentralization of Bitcoin. And so if a lot of Bitcoin ends up in these big custodians, well, then it kind of goes against the point of Bitcoin as we would like to see it ideally. Of course, there'll be some people who use custodians and, okay, fine, but we want to have a good number of people who are able to be self-sovereign, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is what I really like about like the inheritance use case is that it's easier. It actually is easier to transfer assets like to your family when they're in self custody. Even if you're going to go through someone like Casa who will a kind of provide that obviously holds a key and kind of manages a system that'll help you kind of permission this, but also just is somebody at the other end of the line who you developed a relationship with as a company over the years, who is then there and able to kind of walk your loved ones through this scenario. To me, that's like, that's one of the ways that I can have a client for life is if they trust that that our company is going to be able to help out their family and kind of knows and is able to make sure and that they can walk through that process. To me, that is such good business and the kind of business that we want to build. And I think that the kind of business that a lot of people that are Bitcoin only want to build. I want to see more people, doing this, more people kind of taking on this like, hold your hand, not your keys type approach to building, to building within this industry.
Yeah, sure. I'm curious as well. Do you know of any, let's say, common mistakes that people make when they are, doing this inheritance planning and the transition over aspect after somebody has passed?
So, I mean, the common pitfalls are really kind of embarrassing, honestly, because I've seen lawyers have come to me that I've talked to who say like, we don't do this because we had this one situation where, we had a seed phrase that was just like bouncing around our emails and we're emailing it back and forth to each other. We're like, we don't know what to do with this.
Wow.
Seriously, like this is what we're talking about because no one wants to think about this and no one has really put in place a process. I think there's some people that do it. But yeah, as far as I know, Casa is the only kind of productized like solution. And it took us a really long time to get to what we felt was, a very scalable and, and actually usable approach for the vast majority of people who, aren't paying lawyers however much money it costs to, keep a single lawyer on retainer for all your business dealings. It's just a really hard problem. And I think it's going to be a big learning curve for the legal industry. I think it's going to be a big learning curve for our industry. But frankly, like from what I've seen, it's still very early days in terms of having a good approach to this.
Yeah, that's really rough. And the thing is, there will be, some people who, let's say, maybe they're like a big trader and they're like an altcoiner, right? They're like a shitcoiner and they hold, like, they would just have like everything on a ledger. And it's just like probably just a seed and a passphrase kind of setup. But those of us in the Bitcoin world are thinking very long term. And, so that's why it's got to, you're more likely to be on a multi signature setup if you've got a large amount of coin. And so then that necessitates really thinking through and being careful about it. But as you said, it is extremely early. And so I can imagine maybe people with a lot of coin are just sitting on custodians or, some kind of multi-sig setup, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But again, the flexibility, it's not just that like, the flexibility of multisig really gives you a lot of tools to play around with here. And I'll kind of get into a little bit of the specifics about how we kind of manage this. So with Casa, these are all our, we only offer this at our premium tier. So it's going to be a 3 of 5 account. Now on a 3 of 5, that's going to be 3 hardware wallets, different vendors, so that we make sure we never want a quorum of keys to be exposed to the same risk. So we use different vendors within that 3. And we also have a mobile key. I was mentioning it earlier. This is a hot key. It lives on your phone. It is backed up to cloud storage. Obviously, that's never something you'd want to do with a lot of funds in a single sig setup. But because it's only one key out of the quorum, the resiliency and the redundancy and the backups and the availability anywhere you can get access to, land in a new country with the clothes on your back, buy a new iPhone, sign into iCloud, sign into Casa, and you have that key with you. That's an incredibly powerful and flexible tool just in terms of your overall key management. So that's the mobile key, basically a hot key that's highly available, and then you have the Casa recovery key. So the way we think about it is when you actually want to go do an inheritance process, the beneficiary is going to need to have a minimum of one hardware device. And we like to say, if they have more, that's great, but let's make a plan to make sure they have access to that one hardware device and they have access to the seed phrase backup for it as well. And then let's work with them to figure out how to permission them and get them that mobile key, but only get it to them, when the client has passed away, and Casa can basically permission access. We don't hold that key. It's we hold the decryption key for the encrypted key that's then held on the server. That was I may have said that kind of fast, but the backup is encrypted on iCloud, and then Casa holds the decryption key for it. So we're able to basically transfer control of the account over to the beneficiary. That lets them get the mobile key as well. They basically either download it from cloud storage, or they scan it from a QR code that they've printed out ahead of time. That gets them to Casa recovery key is number 3, and now they can move funds to wherever the next step's going to be. But it's that flexibility that you get by being able to have the mobile key, being able to have the hardware key, and being able to have the Casa key. 3 very different security models all coming together in this scenario. And again, we're kind of there to act as a check, make sure you really have passed away, so you're not introducing potential theft, potential backdoors, potential phishing attacks. And there's also plenty of ways in which any of our clients can do this themselves with a more kind of more self-sovereign approach, where you're working through a sovereign recovery thing, where you're going to have more direct access to the seed phrases. But the approach that we want to take, we want to make sure it was well managed, that we were using all the capabilities that we have as a company to the best of our ability to make it as smooth and seamless as possible.
I see, yeah. And so in that approach then, does it still stay a 3 of 5 setup, but one of the keys now is held by your trusted beneficiary or your heir in that case?
Well, so, and there's a ton of different ways you can do it. We have a bunch of different kind of approaches. Typically, yes, it will stay a 3 of 5. But what I like to, for most people, their most immediate beneficiary is most likely going to be their spouse or someone that they live with, someone that they're very close to. And so you don't even necessarily need to kind of turn over a key to them. That's just, hey, babe, it's the, it's in the safe. Here's the combination for the safe. This is the one key we keep at our house. And that's the one that's going to be kind of designated for recovery. And then if they also, are able to get access to the one in the safe deposit box on the other side of town, or the one, up in the bunker in Saskatchewan, you got to take the helicopter up there to get into it, all that good stuff. That's the safe location key. But we really only want to make the plan around that one key that's most accessible, most easy to get access to, just to keep the problem, as constrained as possible. That's not the only way to do it. There's a bunch of other ways to go here. Usually requires thinking about it a lot, kind of consulting with us, thinking through what makes the most sense for you and your family. But I like to kind of provide like the easiest pathway as the most common kind of default approach there, just saying, hey, it's the key that's we already have in our house. It's easy and it's accessible.
Back to the show in a moment. So we're talking about inheritance. Have you also thought about recovery? How would your heirs recover your coins? Well, with CipherSafe.io, they are producing metal backup seed products, and they've got a new one coming out. It's called the Cipher Grid. This is the best value in the industry. You get everything you need for $59. It has 2 stainless steel plates for all 24 of your seed words. It's got privacy by default. It's stainless steel hardware that holds this all together. It can be locked with a padlock. You get a tamper evidence seal, and you get an automatic center punch provided. And just like all CipherSafe products, it's made from stainless steel. It's fireproof, rustproof, and waterproof. So make sure you or your loved ones can access your coins if an accident occurs. Go to CipherSafe.io and use the code Livera for a discount. And next up is my favorite Bitcoin hardware wallet, the Cold Card. So this is a great choice if you have your coins on the exchange, or maybe you're on a phone wallet and you need to upgrade now to a hardware wallet. The Cold Card is really versatile. You can use it with Sparrow Wallet or Spectre or Electrum. Now, some people say it's a little hard if they are new, but I think you can make certain trade-offs with the Cold Card to help ease that new coiner into the process. So you might use it on Sparrow with the default setup. You might not have a passphrase, and you might get them to direct plug the device instead of using the microSD air gap, which is a feature with the Cold Card. And then later they can upgrade to using these features like Seed XOR or having a passphrase, or potentially even using the Cold Card as part of a multi-signature setup. So go to coinkite.com and use the code Livera to order your Cold Card. And finally, Unchained Capital. So if you are sitting on a single signature phone wallet or hardware wallet, or you've left your coins on the exchange, well, check out Unchained. They can help you get set up with multi-signature. So you can have multiple devices keep them in different locations, and this will dramatically improve your security standpoint. So with Unchained Capital, you can buy 2 hardware wallets, and that's Trezor, Ledger, Coldcard, and you can get set up with a vault. Now, if you need help, they offer a concierge service, and that's available for individuals or for businesses. You can pay that upfront fee, use code Livera for a discount there. They'll do some calls with you, they'll ship hardware wallets to you, and get you set up with a vault. Having a multi-signature vault will give you a lot more peace of mind in terms of how you secure and store your Bitcoin for the long term. Unchained also offer loans, so you can borrow against your Bitcoin, and they also have a range of educational material about Bitcoin. And my favorite is Gradually Then Suddenly, the series by Parker Lewis. So go and find out more at unchained.com. And now back to the show. Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. And yeah, as you said, it's that flexibility of having one of the keys be the hot encrypted key, mobile key that is able to be transitioned over to the heir or the beneficiary or the spouse or whoever. And then the combo of that 3 of 5. And so I guess just for listeners as well, if you're new, part of this whole idea is we are trying to eliminate single points of failure. So the idea being you don't have enough of a quorum on you at any one given time. So that way someone can't just go gun to the head, hey, pay me all your Bitcoins right now. You're going to have to say, well, no, you're going to have to take me to, this security vault, or you're going to have to take me overseas because I've got a key over there or something like that, to make it, I guess, an extremely expensive attack. And so that's the general idea we're going with here. And then I'm actually curious as well, like with that whole idea of geographically distributing keys, what's been, the Casa approach and thought around that right now in the kind of this age of, COVID hysteria restrictions? Has that been difficult for Casa customers, or have they kind of found a way around or managed around this?
It's definitely been, it was definitely kind of an unexpected challenge that came up for us. Typically it just means more use of the cost recovery key, because, anyone who's looking to move funds around is going to, basically they need a minimum of 1 hardware device to sign with themselves, plus the mobile key that gets you to 2. And most people have, fairly ready access to that mobile key, obviously on your phone, and then that 1 hardware device that you keep relatively close at hand. And so it's just about getting that, getting that third signature. Typically, you might have another key like within your metro area, but if the banks are closed and there's all kinds of other travel restrictions, that can definitely be a challenge. And that's where Casa comes in. We hold the recovery key. Give us a call. We'll do all our security checks. Make you wait for a security delay, but then after that, we'll sign a transaction on your behalf, and you can move funds. We did have some people who I think rethought their setup a little bit and had us ship them another hardware wallet. So, because they knew they weren't going to get access to something that was in another country for a very long time. And so then they just, rotated that key out, rotated a new key in with the new hardware that we shipped them. Did that kind of that transfer using their mobile key, the key they had access to, and the cost recovery key. And then they, that new key they added in, they kept it a bit closer at hand, so they would be able to sign on their own.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, but I think, you're right. It's just about thinking through carefully, what am I going to be able to access? And hopefully over time, if the restrictions come down and people can move and travel around a bit more easily, then it kind of gets back to a more ideal scenario where you can move around more freely and put the keys in harder to reach locations, so that way it's better from a security point of view, right?
One of the interesting things that we've also seen is a lot more people kind of living a more nomadic lifestyle and moving around a lot. And that's definitely been an interesting challenge to help people deal with, but a pretty cool one as well, because there's just ways in which with multi-sig, if you're moving around, you can make sure that, generally speaking, you always have access to your funds, but you can also do things, to make sure that while you're traveling, you're never gonna run into a problem where, some sketchy border guard is gonna give you a hard time, or, or you get mugged or something like that. So, one thing that we do, for instance, is, we have this emergency lockdown feature. They'll lock down the account until you can get in touch with Casa. And so something that some people will do is they'll say, hey, can I do an emergency lockdown while I'm traveling? We said, yeah, sure, absolutely. And that way you can actually travel with 2 keys, but you also know that, you're not going to be able to log into your Casa account. You're not going to be able to get access to that mobile key. It was totally shut down until you call up and you go through myself or someone on my team who's going to verify, yes, it's really you, you're safe in your new country, and now we can go ahead and unlock that account for you. So there's just a lot of flexibility that you get with multi-sig. And that's really that's the biggest thing that I think that people miss is yes, this is all about security. It's all about keeping your funds in the most secure way possible, but it also opens up a whole world. So it's not just I put that ledger in the drawer and forget about it and pray that, the maid never notice to look for a seed phrase, but it opens up flexibility for inheritance, for travel, for all these different kind of challenges that, and, life situations that apply to everybody. Yeah. Anyways, I just want to see more approaches to it. I want to see more people kind of taking advantage of some of this stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool about the nomadic people aspect and being able to to lock down the account for a little while and then reopen it back up. And I'm curious as well, maybe obviously without doxing any particular customers or whatever, but have there been any customers who've, or at least in the industry, have you heard of people who've had trouble, let's say, moving through the airport, how you got to put your bag through, and whether they would, I don't know, look at your hardware wallets and say, oh, is that something dodgy? Or another one people have is that concern about if, let's say, they had to take a seed plate through, and would that be visible in that X-ray machine that you have to go through when you're flying? I don't know if you've got any experiences or kind of things you've heard on that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, on a personal level, I fly with so much hardware devices and Faraday bags. It's all Casa stuff. It's not nothing. None of my personal stuff, which I lost in a boating accident a very long time ago. So I have to work so hard at Casa to stack that Bitcoin. But yeah, I've never personally had an issue. Generally my recommendation is, if you're gonna take a Faraday bag with a hardware device, throw a bunch of other USB sticks and other kind of just electronic junk in there. And most guards are, most security agents are gonna say, just a bunch of stuff. I'm not too worried about this. You definitely want to be very careful if you are traveling if you need to travel with a quorum, if you need to travel with 2 keys plus a mobile phone. You want to be extremely careful about how you do that. And that's when PIN codes become important. That's when, features like the lockdown, actually locking your account down. And then also on top of that, deleting the app off your phone, things like that become really important. But generally speaking, if you're just traveling with a single hardware device, just make it look like it's not a big deal. If it seems like you're trying to hide it or it seems like you're trying to do something weird with it, you're a lot more likely to draw someone's attention than if it just looks like, it's kind of a mess in your backpack, which isn't hard for a lot of us to do in the first place anyways.
Yeah, of course. And I'm curious, one other thing came up to my mind is the seedless approach that Casa take, but you also mentioned that your beneficiary might have a seed as well. So how does that part work? Are you saying for that specific key in the inheritance case, where you're using, you're having one party hold one key, they should also hold the 24 words on a seed plate or some kind of metal backup for it? Or what's the difference there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this because I get to get into the nitty gritty of how we think about this stuff again, because we actually changed our approach a little bit and we say we are partially seedless. So the way I think about it is we have 2 of our keys are highly resilient. They're not going to be lost. They're recoverable in a bunch of different situations. That's that mobile key we talked about, and that's that Casa recovery key, available to you anywhere you go in the world. And then from there, we want to make sure the rest of our keys are very secure, because resilient, accessible around the world means potentially able to be stolen. So we have the 3 hardware wallets, which are very secure, and 2 out of the 3 of those are going to be so secure we're not even going to back them up. And the assumption is, if you lose one of those hardware devices, we are not going to restore that same key on a new hardware device. We're just going to replace the key entirely, replace the device obviously, but also just get a brand new key. And what we're going to do is we're going to use 3 of the remaining 4 keys in your setup to do a key rotation, which is basically a transfer of funds from the old account to the new account. So that's what we do with those 2 hardware devices if we were to lose them, the ones that we don't have the seed phrase for. We are now encouraging people to hold on to one of their seed phrases, in part for inheritance reasons, because this is going to give you kind of an additional backup that that your loved one could recover. But also, just as kind of an additional piece of resiliency, we want that key to be basically, instead of 100%, single location, very secure, but not recoverable. We want it to be like 98% super secure single location, but we also like to have a little bit of that backup, a little bit of that recoverability on that one as well to kind of get us a little bit more flexibility. There's also some other fun things you can do if you want to get to like your 301 level multi-sig with cloning the device and having different copies of the same key on different hardware devices in different locations. You can get super fancy with all this stuff. But bottom line is that we do like having one seed phrase for one of the hardware devices available. And that's a pretty subtle shift, but a pretty important one when it comes to kind of thinking about the holistic picture of recoverability versus security of your keys.
Gotcha. Yeah. So put in other words, then it's like your Casa mobile key can be recovered. The Casa recovery key, you guys have got that covered, and you've got that obviously able to be recovered. And then now you want to have, of those 3 remaining hardware wallets, you want to have the seed plate or seed, phrase backed up for at least one of those, for just one of those 3.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that exactly. And it's so 3 keys are recoverable, 3 keys are single location, and we're very careful with how you manage that seed phrase. It's going to go in a tamper-evident bag. We're actually going to recommend that you store it in the same location that the key itself is. So it's again that same assumption. Like if your house burns down and the key and the seed are in your house, that's fine because you have the other ones that are not there. They're able to recover it. But we don't want to kind of start to increase more complexity by moving that seed phrase somewhere else or combining with another key. So still, we basically assume that it's a that same single location model, so that that key is never in multiple places. But it does give us a lot more flexibility, a lot more recoverability, also in some different scenarios.
Right, yeah, and then that can give us a little bit more. Let's say someone is really paranoid about bit rot or something happening.
Yep.
Then this is one thing that helps you, that you know that you can always recover it because you've at least got that one hardware wallet with the seed phrase written down, or ideally on a metal backup that's stored with the hardware wallet, and then mobile key plus Casa recovery key, which means you will be able to spend even if you lost the other 2 hardware wallets. And I guess that there can be a lot of complexity in this as well, because for people who are doing, let's say, the DIY method, then they have to make sure, even if they lost one of their hardware wallets, that they've still got the public keys for all of them. And that's like a common, like a thing that people don't necessarily understand unless they're kind of really deep into the technical details of how all this stuff works. So that's one point there. Also wondering what your thoughts are on the various different hardware wallets. I know they have, I guess, different levels of multi-signature support. Like I know, for example, Coldcard and Trezor tend to be very multi-sig friendly, whereas I think, as I understand, the Ledger is perhaps a bit less multi-sig friendly than the others. What's been your experience with that, and is that shifting over time and changing?
Yeah, I mean, I work with Trezor, Ledger, and Coldcard most directly. They're all good devices. They all have different trade-offs. I would say my personal favorite is the Coldcard, and what I like about that is I really like their approach to UX. It's a little more complicated. It takes a little bit more doing, but it's like it's like you pop up in the hood of a car. A new car, all you're gonna see is like a box, and then there's gonna be like chips and boards in there, and you're not at home do-it-yourselfer is going to be able to do anything on a new car. An old car, you can see how everything is working inside. You can see the timing belt, you can see the piston, you can see the oil intake. There's all the different parts of it you can see, and it's all right out there in front of you. And to me, that's how a Coldcard is. You see everything it's doing. It's very everything is kind of laid out there, and you understand clearly what's going on under the hood. Trezor is great for people that are a lot newer because it's not going to give you all that complexity right off the bat. And I think that's a great device. Ledger's kind of in the middle. I think it's pretty user friendly. Frankly, just the way the UX worked with the buttons is not my favorite in the world. But yeah, I like all the hardware devices for different reasons, but I'm most excited about QR code signing. This is going to make multi-sig so much easier. This is going to make all the stuff that we do so much easier because you no longer have to deal with all the complexity of like the USB hub and the different USB drivers and the different operating systems, the different browsers, all of these pieces that kind of get between you and the device that are have nothing to do with Bitcoin, have nothing to do with that really couldn't care less about what you're trying to do with it. All those pieces go away, is directly from device to device, camera to camera. It just makes life a lot easier. So I'm really excited about all the new QR code signing that's coming online soon.
Right, yeah, so that might be useful then in the case of something like Foundation device or Spectre DIY, which is out nowadays. I know Kobo also has QR code scanning, but I know Kobo has just recently gone through a little bit of a kerfuffle there, and it looks like Lixin has split a way out to kind of do that. But yeah, hopefully the overall ecosystem expands in terms of options, as you're saying, around QR codes. And so for listeners who are unfamiliar, basically it passes that transaction back and forth using QR code scanning. So the wallet will scan the QR, and then on the other side, you'll flip it back. And then the device, let's say the laptop or the phone that you're using, will then scan and ingest that signed transaction from the physical hardware wallet or signing device. Maybe that's a more correct term or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. It's literally passing the raw transaction data across in just this visual kind of code format, and it takes like 9 different QR codes to kind of get the whole get the whole payload across every time. But I mean, it's one of the I think all these improvements that we do on nodes, on hardware wallets, and all the kind of hard pieces of Bitcoin tech, they feel like you're grinding to edge out those like 5% improvements, those like 7% improvements, which are great and necessary, but it always feels like so much work for like a little bit of gain. I feel like the QR code signing is a 10x improvement in terms of the user experience. It has the potential to totally just change the approachability of multi-sig, of using Bitcoin securely, of using hardware wallets, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, that's cool to see. I'll tell you what, though. I mean, maybe not to be too much of a downer on it, but sometimes I've played around, obviously, with different setups, and sometimes I get weird results if, depending on which software you're using and like depending on the lighting in the room and things like
Yeah.
that. But I think I definitely agree with you, though. It is a big improvement overall that you get from having the QR setup. And I mean, for me, I have multiple setups going, and I'm testing things and trying different things out and so on. So that's kind of my experience with it. So yeah, I guess kind of where do you think this industry is going? Like, do you think we're gonna be able to get multi-sig to the masses?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yes, is the answer. Absolutely, we're going to be able to get multi-sig to the masses, but I'm not sure they're going to know that it's multi-sig. I'm not sure that they're going to be thinking about like, oh yeah, well, this person holds PubKey 1, this person holds PubKey 2. This is how it works. I have like these 3 signing devices. Where I think we're going to go with it is, I think it's going to go to, I think that what I do, is going to be very professionalized. I think there's going to be a lot of people doing what I do right now. And essentially, there's some freelancers out there. There's us. There's Unchained. There's, maybe a dozen people in the US who at least work for a company and get paid to basically like be a kind of professional Bitcoin consultant and help people with their security. I think that in order for this to scale, or in order for Bitcoin to scale, I think you're going to need to see this role basically become as common as something like a lawyer or an accountant. Just the professional expert who can help guide anybody through through this world and show them how to do it the right way. It's a lawyer is your agent. They are basically acting on your behalf in the legal system. It's very different from a banker who, while they kind of say they're acting on your behalf, they actually control the keys. They actually control the funds directly. They're standing between you and your money. And so, to me, I think that's really what I want to see happen. I want to see more people, more Bitcoiners, kind of saying, in what way can I be, Uncle Jim for my community? How can I be Uncle Jim for my family? How can I run a node? How can I hold a key in their multi-sig? How can I help them recover all this stuff? And ultimately, like, I want to see that professionalized. I want to see people getting paid for this. I want to build models that allow Bitcoiners to like just be Bitcoiners and help everyone else in the world kind of tap into this network in an open, permissionless, and ultimately a way that supports the network. I think we need to build we have a decentralized network, but we have to actually build the human decentralization on top of it. Because if we don't do it that way, you're right. It's all the Bitcoin's going to end up in the hands of custodians. All the miners are going to end up in giant pools that are that then become these honeypots for governments, or these honeypots for other attackers to start chipping away at the network. So that's what I want to see. I think it's definitely happening. There's more interest in the stuff that we're doing. You're starting to see other companies coming online to think about this. I don't know. Compass Mining is a really interesting one where they're kind of taking that same approach to and doing it on the mining doing on the mining side. I need to kind of dig in on what's going on with some of the Lightning stuff, but I see a lot of that as a potential future for growing the Lightning network. Obviously, what Strike and those guys are doing, I think it's a little bit different. But this is where I see the industry going. If we're going to be decentralized, is that Bitcoiners are going to, build businesses, but not, giant hyperscale tech business. Build person-person businesses where you have clients, you're helping them out with this stuff. You maybe have a couple partners, maybe you have a couple people working for you, but that's how we kind of build the decentralization into into like the human layer that is going to match up the decentralization of the network. And so that's where I really want to see the industry going.
Yeah, so as an example, we've seen Bitcoin Beach with their community bank kind of wallet, and they've got like a multi-sig for the on-chain, aspect of it, and then Lightning, which is like a custodial Lightning wallet shared by the thousands of users. And then so maybe we see that as a model for various communities around the world where they have some kind of multi-sig bank operated by different, people in the community. And that also brings up the question then as well, because do you think the industry will standardize around certain approaches and certain standard ways of storing most of your coin, right? So maybe let's say most people have, Moon Wallet or Phoenix or Breeze just as their little day-to-day Lightning wallet. And most people are not going to be running a routing node, right? Let's be honest. Although many of my listeners are the kind of person who would, but the average day-to-day user just have a Lightning wallet. And then for their stack, for their HODL stack, their life savings, that's where they get the multi-sig. And, I wonder whether that will standardize into certain approaches. And, we'll have like a standardized 2 of 3 approach or a standardized 3 of 5 approach. Do you see that kind of thing happening? Or do you kind of see it more just like there'll just be a multitude of various options with passphrases this and, seed phrases stored here, or that kind of thing?
That's a good question. I tend to think that I think there's going to be some kind of standard approaches that make a lot of sense to most people, but I don't think it's going to be totally standardized because there's just so many kind of cultural differences. And this is just one of those things that I love about Bitcoin is that it has to, it's so simple. And like the ideas are, we want to have this base layer that's like the minimum amount that we can agree on. It's like the minimum viable consensus is like the whole thing that Bitcoin is about. Like, and that's what money is. It's just like, what's the least that we can all agree on, given all our differences across humanity? What's the least that we can agree on so we can do business with each other and we can go from there. And so I think you're going to have all kinds of different setups because, for me, what makes the most sense for my, for my client base is going to be wildly different than, someone who's trying to create a Bitcoin Beach type community. It's going to be wildly different from someone, from like a Swiss private banker who like only serves like the highest and most like ultra high net worth types, who want nothing to do with the technical side or as little to do with that as possible. Is going to be totally different from like a family in India or a family in China that has to like avoid the authoritarian regime that's cracking down on it. There's so many, Bitcoin will be as diverse as kind of the human experiences, and ultimately you're going to have all kinds of different approaches to custody that will match up the way that people kind of map their relationships across the people that matter to them. So yeah, I think there's definitely going to be kind of some primitives that just make sense from a technical standpoint. But I think that also like there's just so many different ways to do it, and multisig really introduces that potential to kind of like create different approaches that make sense for different like small, tight, intimate groups of people.
Yeah, so maybe one way to think of it is like in the early years, there were different approaches tried. And I think people have sort of found which of those were quote unquote dead ends, right? So one would be having everything on a single signature wallet. That for a large amount of coin, that's basically a dead end. No one really does that. Shamir's secret sharing, kind of a dead end, right? Like unless you're doing it in like a very special context and it's only one part of your overall setup, that kind of thing. Whereas in the past, that used to be seen as like, oh, this is maybe this is how it'll be done in the future. So maybe it will be certain standardized approaches around multi-sig for large amounts of coins, and then different configurations that are popular, but people might have all of their own little flavors and spins on it.
Yeah, definitely. And, to me, this is the beat again. It's the great thing about Bitcoin is, technology can scale out to the world, and this is what this is like the whole idea of of the internet, and like build a product with like one guy, Satoshi, built Bitcoin. and then it scaled to the whole world, and that's beautiful. But the layers that you build on top of it have to kind of account for that different human context and the different experiences of people. Otherwise, it's just like you're kind of flattening everything. If it's like, okay, well, yeah, now the same Facebook platform is going to serve everybody in the world, but it's going to serve everyone in kind of the same way. So the Bitcoin's like social scalability aspect to it, and just the kind of like the way in which it doesn't, it requires kind of the minimum level of input, and then lets the users kind of do the rest and add the context to it. That to me is like the future that, really kind of bright future that brings the best of technology in with and leaves aside some of the baggage that it brought with it in the kind of the first iteration, the web, the web 1.0 and 2.0 versions that I think are going to be left behind.
Right. Yeah. So look, let's bring it back then. So let's summarize some of the key points, I guess. So if you had to leave some tips for listeners who are thinking about Bitcoin and inheritance, maybe what would you tell them? And maybe split it up, and maybe some of the listeners who are not Casa customers, and then any tips for those who are Casa customers.
Yeah, of course. So, if you're thinking about inheritance, the most important thing to do is take the time, sit down, think about it, and go through it. And then take the time and sit down with your loved ones and take them through it as well. You want to make sure that they're going to be able to get access to that, to whatever the quorum is. If it's a single sig, you're going to want to make sure they have access to the device. You're going to want to make sure they have access to the seed phrase. If you use a passphrase, it's critically important that they have access to that too, because without the passphrase, they don't, they can have the private key, and they will not have access to the funds. So it's important that that you have a plan in place for them to access, whatever it's going to take to move those funds. And the other really important thing is that they know someone they know someone who you trust, who they can get in touch with to help them, because they're going to have questions. It's going to be complicated. It's going to be a hard thing for them to navigate. And you don't want them to be in a position where they don't know who to go to for that help. They don't know who to get in touch with, or how to get in touch with someone that that they should trust. So that's really the most important thing. And I don't think I have any like specific advice for Casa clients other than email me and we'll get you onboarded and all that kind of stuff. The other thing that I would just leave for anybody is keep it simple as much as you can. We spend a lot of time thinking about like, what is the one thing that a beneficiary has to do? So we have like an envelope that, the beneficiary will get is like, go and open up the envelope, and here's where all the stuff is. And so if you're doing it yourself, it's like, what's the one place they can go to get all the stuff? But then make sure you're also thinking about the security of that, which can certainly get complicated. Bottom line is, get help if you need it, but there's definitely a lot of ways to do this, and there's going to be a lot of people in the industry who are going to come up with all kinds of solutions on how to tackle exactly this problem.
Excellent. And Hector, for listeners who want to find you online, where can they find you, and where can they find Casa?
Yep, you can find me on Twitter. I am Hector R, so Hector with an extra R on there, 159. That's Twitter, and then we're at keys.casa. Pretty simple there. And my DMs are open. Always happy to talk Bitcoin, inheritance, whatever else. And that's best way to get in touch.
Thank you, Hector.
All right, Stephan, have a good one.
So share the episode with your family and friends. Find me at stephanlivera.com/286. And of course, if you're liking the show, make sure you leave a review so that new people can find me. That's it from me. I'll see you guys in the Citadels.